Okay, another blind reacts looking at. I don't know what we're, I don't know what we're looking at. I don't know what this is. Something to do with JonBenet Ramsey. It's another interview or something, some sort. More updated. It's more of an updated interview though. Is what I know. I think is what this was. So, yeah.
December 26, 1996. A brisk, clear morning in Boulder, Colorado. John Ramsey was up before dawn.
Well, I was shaving, I guess, in the bathroom.
And we have a back staircase from the bedroom areas. And I always come down that staircase, and I'm usually the first one down. And the note was lying across the run of one of the stair treads. And it was kind of dimly lit because it was very early in the morning. And I started to read it, and it was addressed to John.
A terrifying message scrawled across 3 pages.
It said, "We have your daughter."
She lying. She's lying right there. She's lying. She's already started lying.
Heard Patsy scream. I could tell by her scream that something horrible was going on. I didn't know what.
I immediately ran back upstairs and pushed open her door, and she was not in her bed.
JonBenet Ramsey was found dead.
The stair treads. And it was addressed
3 pages.
Horrible. What's going on? I didn't know what.
First of all,
I could tell by her scream that something horrible was going on. I didn't know what.
something about that.
What? Horrible. What's going on? I didn't know.
Something about that look seems too nonchalant for me. You are describing, I guess the problem I'm having is that you're describing an instance in when you heard your wife scream a scream you've never heard before, and you talk about it like it's so nonchalant. Yo, when we talk about trauma, the thing about trauma is that, you know, people are hesitant to talk about trauma because trauma, people relive it over and over again. There's some sort of emotions that are invoked, that are present when we talk about trauma. And I think that it's very weird. I'm not trying to be biased. I'm just saying it's very weird that it almost seems like there's a nonchalant behavior to describing, like, he's just doing an interview. Is like, that's crazy. Like, you're just interviewing. There's nothing to be like, you see how I'm getting? It's like, so I ran downstairs, and one of the things that I saw that, there's some animation, but he's like, she screamed and I didn't know what it was. Are you doing an earnings call, John? Is that what you're doing? Are you doing a report to investors, John? Is that what you're doing? John, there are some missing items on this income statement. Some things that we need explained. Your 10K mentions this, but it doesn't make sense. Can you tell us more about what you mean when you guys put this into 10K? Well, when we filed the 10K, we were trying to understand. There is no emotion. Like, he's sitting like bruh.
What?
I immediately ran back upstairs and pushed open her door, and she was...
It's like she's trying to fake cry, but she can't. She's trying to make her eyes water, but she can't. And I really wanted to get to this. I don't know when this was taken, but why is her bed made? if she was taken, because there's a theory that she was taken from her bed. Why is the crime scene disturbed?
Not in her bed.
It seems like, I don't know if a 6-year-old would do this, would lay things across her bed like this. I would expect it to be messier. It seems like there was an adult who organized whatever's on her bed in this way, and maybe this was after the facts. You know, we done everything that we need to do with this, and so maybe they went back in and said, if we're assuming that they didn't do it, they went back in and said, you know what, I want to make it up. I just want it to look clean. I wanted to, you know, I'm going to disturb the crime scene a little bit and just make it look nice. And so maybe there was some stuff that they were looking over here to, you know, just, I don't know why it looks so clean.
JonBenet Ramsey was found dead, strangled in the basement of that home. Wasn't kidnapped. This case still never solved. No one's been held responsible since 1996, but some huge developments tonight we want to talk about. Let's bring in our special guest joining us in New York, senior reporter for the U.S. Sun, Luke Kenton is with us. Luke, great to see you. Thanks so much. Read your article. Wow. Let's talk about this development. It's a man named Gary Oliva. Gary Oliva, tell us what you found out about him, what his link is to JonBenet Ramsey.
So Gary Oliva, first and foremost, is not a good guy. The story involving Gary kind of begins on the 27th of December 1996, when he was reported to Boulder police, because basically the night before he'd called an old high school friend back in California, who he said through tears and could barely catch his breath, "I've just hurt a little girl." So this was on the night that JonBenet's body was, a few hours after JonBenet's body was found on December 26th. He was crying that he'd hurt a little girl in Boulder, and he hung up the phone.
Another theory. So this is an alternate theory.
Now his friend that was on the other end of the phone didn't know really what to make of that call, was obviously concerned, but couldn't get any information out of him. It wasn't until the next day that he went on the front porch, picked up the newspaper, and saw the news that a 6-year-old girl had been killed in Boulder, Colorado. He immediately calls the Boulder Police Department, reports the call from the day before, and then 3 months pass, he doesn't hear anything, and he calls the tip line again, reports it to Boulder Police, doesn't hear anything again. Fast forward until the next day that didn't know really what to make of the phone. Now his friend that was on the other end of the phone, through tears and could barely catch his breath, "I've just hurt a little girl." So this was on the night that JonBenet's body was, a few hours after JonBenet's body was found on December 26th. He was crying that he'd hurt a little girl in Boulder, and he hung up the phone. Now his friend that was on the other end of the phone didn't know really what to.
He called on the 26th after JonBenet's body was found. Was there a press release? Maybe it's just a coincidence.
Make of that call, was obviously concerned, but couldn't get any information out of him. It wasn't until the next day that he went on the front porch, picked up the newspaper, and saw the news that a 6-year-old girl had been killed.
So on the 27th, he found the newspaper to confirm what his friend told him on the 26th.
In Boulder, Colorado. He immediately calls the Boulder Police Department, reports the call from the day before, and then 3 months pass, he doesn't hear anything, and he calls the tip line again, reports it to Boulder Police, doesn't hear anything again. Fast forward 19 years later, Gary Oliva is in prison for child pornography offences and confesses in a series of letters to the same person that he called that night, claiming to have killed Benet by accident.
This is unbelievable. I mean, this is, did police ever talk to this man in California? I mean, he is claiming to have gotten a call before this story is even in the news from this guy.
That's what I was just trying to find. What the heck? He called before it was in the news? Possible. Calls a friend and says, before it hits the news, boom. And then the very next day, it comes out. Okay.
Yeah, so hours before it, made headlines across the country, he said, "I've hurt a little girl," and he's in Boulder. And bearing in mind at the time, this guy was was associated with the property about 13 houses away. He was getting his mail from a church, 13 houses away from the Ramsey family. And the tip, like I said, wasn't followed up upon immediately by Boulder police. At the time, they were zeroing on either Patsy or John Ramsey being responsible for JonBenet's death. It wasn't actually until 4 years later when he was arrested.
Well, wait a minute, sir. It's not how it happens. It's very early in the investigation. We are just taking, first of all, this would have been the first tip, wouldn't it? This would have been like one of the first tips, because if this dude calls and says, "Hey, yo, this is, my friend told me this stuff." First of all, we have no way to track that call ever happened, or we didn't. Second of all, they're early in the investigation at this point, so we're still trying to figure out whether or not we have to first check the family. That's number one. Number two, number three, it just goes on the list, and I don't know why it takes 4 years. But if it takes 4 years, you remember, as we talked about before, John and Patsy have been stonewalling people for 4 years. It took them 3 or 4 years to take a lie detector to test. They failed. And then they took it again, and then they passed. We can't get nowhere with the investigation if y'all lying and stopping us from moving forward.
On the campus of the University of Colorado in Boulder, with pictures of JonBenet in his bag, a poem that he'd written to JonBenet called Ode to JonBenet, and he was also found with a stun gun, and that was kind of a crucial development for investigators, because over the course of their investigation, after the first few months, they kind of theorized that perhaps that she was subdued with a stun gun prior to her death. So that's when police started looking at Gary, which was 4 years later.
Yet nothing seemed to come of it all. Was he, and my understanding, there's a photo of him or images of him at a vigil for JonBenet as well?
Yeah, that's right. So this vigil took place on the year anniversary of her death. So that was on Christmas night, I believe that was held a short distance away from the Ramseys' home. And that picture that we published was actually taken by private investigators hired by John Ramsey, who were investigating Gary at that time, believing him to be a very credible suspect and certainly somebody that's capable of committing such a horrific act. The Boulder police wouldn't look at Gary for another 3 years after that.
Unbelievable. One final question. How specific were the details in these?
Of course. Of course. Of course. Of course. Private investigators from the Ramseys would be. So it wasn't, well, first of all, dude, why were you there? If you were there, why were you there? I'd like to see the picture of him there to confirm. First of all. Second of all, why were you there? Second of all, how convenient that you guys are having this guy followed in order to get the heat off of you. You zero in on him, but y'all done went to lengths to hire your own team. We've talked about this before, but you've gone to lengths to hire your own team to keep us off your track. John, Patsy, we can't move forward until we check you guys out. But you did the first call that came in, you ran with it. That's not how things work. That's not police work, bro.